Yeah, I didn't get my batch of those. I haven't
Yeah,
seen you guys.
I'm waiting to hand them out.
Okay.
It's not really a batch. They sent individual vials labeled.
Okay.
It's really quite impressive.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
So each one they just sent like, you know, each tire just sent, you know, 2 or 3 of their flies. So what I wanted to do for all of us is catalog them, and then I actually brought them with on our last trip to try and divvy them up, and then everybody forgot. They just, you know, ended up sitting in my truck. So.
All right. Got my sound working. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So everyone there? It seems so, and also Coco also in here too, I believe. Hey everyone. Sorry to be a little bit audio's work out late, and hey everyone, and thank you very much for attending this our first called the meeting the expert. So I would like to say that everyone stay safe, and this whole purpose that to keep ourselves busy and stay at home, and we take the opportunity to learn from each other. And I would like to introduce today, we get a panelist, and I consider the expert in the field. Start with Dr. Robert Worthing, and who have been fly fishing, Tenkara fishing many years, and Dr. Robert would introduce himself. And then we also have Anthony Naples, and he also running the blog called Casting Around, and also used to run the company called Three River Tenkara. And Anthony used to sell a lot of high-end Tenkara rods, such as the top notch from Japan, like Oni rod, type 1, type 2, and type 3, and also the European rod by Tenkara Times. And then also I would like to introduce Sment, who is, I consider a Tenkara nomadic, and he have been travel around the country and fish. And Matt have very high passions about Tenkara fishing, and he upset enough that produced called the Badger Tenkara. And now he become a billionaire and travel around the country and fish only. So let the panel take over the control. And if you have any question, please type onto here. And to be sure that there's a little button and you type to panelists, and then you can ask the panelists a question. Or you can ask individual person there. So who would like to start first? Rob, I introduced you first, so you start first.
Okay. Am I answering a question first, or am I saying hello first? Hi, everybody.
You say hello first.
I'm Rob Worthing. I am one of the 3 founding members of a group out of Salt Lake City, Utah, called Tenkara Guides. We are the I wonder if we're still the only dedicated guide service in the Western Hemisphere to fixed line fishing. We've been in business for about 10 years now. I live closer to the East Coast these days, and we enjoy doing a whole lot of different kind of fishing. I'm particularly enjoying the mountain streams in the Appalachians right now.
I guess my turn. So
go for it.
I'm Anthony Naples, and like Luong said, I ran Three Rivers Tenkara for a while, and for maybe 6 years, 5-6 years. Started fly fishing back when I went to Penn State and fly fishing, you know, central in Pennsylvania there, and took up Tenkara, 10 years ago, something like that. And kind of took over just because it worked so well. I was a convert to Tenkara, not for any philosophical reasons, but just because it worked for me and the streams that I fish here in Pennsylvania. So off to you, Matt.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here with you tonight. My name is Matt Sment. I am a former co-founder of what was Badger Tenkara for about 5 or 6 years, which was a rod company, and we also specialized in doing presentations and classes. Did a lot of work trying to help the Boy Scouts of America take Tenkara on as a fly fishing option. I've done some guiding all over Wisconsin and traveled all over the country fishing for trout at this point. Your Rockies, your Appalachians, your Sierras, the driftless region of Wisconsin. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here with you tonight and answer any questions. So I'm not sure if there's a particular plan. So let's, attendees, you want to type in some questions into that chat there, and I guess we'll take swings at them.
Well, I have one of the person who sent me a text message, and she would like to know about salmon fishing. So can anyone kind of picking up that topic first?
Yeah, so there is a dedicated fixed line fly fishing method in Japan for salmon. You won't see those rods in the US very often because the salmon rods, which tend to run north of 15 feet long, cost in a range of thousands. One rod might be $4,000. Matt, if you're going to get a rod right now, I'm gonna be really angry. Do you have one?
Well, you know, I did make billions of dollars.
Right, I was gonna say,
So
maybe the first one. But there is a dedicated form. You can actually find some video online. There are a few different versions of it. It's definitely something that I don't think has been explored as much in the United States. I had some interest in giving it a shot when I spent a little bit of time up in the Hood River area in Oregon, and just never got the right tool to really execute it. But I think it'd be very interesting for the United States to pick that up.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to the salmon fishing. I'm mostly medium, small trout streams is kind of my thing. So
salmon's not something I've been able to get into. I've tried taking a few swipes at steelhead. I think probably the closest thing I've had on a hook to that size is probably northern pike, which again, I can't compare because I haven't fished for both. But I think you're going to find that you probably want, when choosing equipment for that, if it's not an outright specialized salmon rod, something with a little more flex. I think you're probably going to want something that isn't overly stiff to really give you some give in your system and fighting something that big. Not something that you're going to be able to lose control over the fish, but definitely don't overlook flex in big fish rods. Stiffness is not the answer to big fish.
So I see a good question that came in. It says, any advantage to using a Tenkara rod over a 2-weight fly rod, fishing small streams and panfish? I'll take the first crack at that. The major advantage to Tenkara that I find is that I can use an ultralight rig. My rig in Tenkara tends to be substantially lighter than you could get away with a 2-weight or even a 1-weight fly rod. Snowbee has a great 1-weight fly rod right now. That ultralight rig allows me to, especially in smaller streams that are more turbulent, hold the line off the water, maintain control of my fly, get better strike detection, get better hook set rate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the advantage is all about that ultralight rig. And oh, by the way, it's more portable, a little bit quicker to set up, and doesn't weigh as much for when you're hiking into those small streams and when you're waving your arm around all day.
yeah, I mean, I'll second the ultralight thing, and in general, just being able to keep your line off of the water with a longer Tenkara rod. Even a smallish Tenkara rod is going to be longer than most, 2-weights rod, unless you're talking about a Euro rod. And if you're looking at like those, like a Euro 2-weight rod, say a 10.5 foot, 11 foot 2-weight, the advantage of a Tenkara rod over something like that, because I've done both of those. I've done a lot of Euro nymphing the last couple of years. The big advantage is, I would say, is casting light lines. With the Tenkara rod, you can actually still cast the weight of the line. There's a lot more line control when you're casting a Tenkara rod. When you're going to the ultralight lines with a Euro rod, you're casting the nymphs, the weight of the nymph a lot more. And it's not that you can't get really good at that. I mean, you can. I mean, I've watched guys and they're really good at it. But you do have a lot more control, and it's a lot easier with a Tenkara rod to do those ultralight lines. If you're talking about that kind of Euro nymphing and the Euro rigging with like mono lines. So the Tenkara rod advantage, I think, is it's a lot easier to get into the casting than it is with the Euro rods, just because the tip of a Tenkara rod is so much softer. And maybe softer is not the right word, but just finer, and there's a lot more flex to it than you can get with any Euro rod. So that's my 2 cents to that. And the other thing, I guess, as a guy who gets overwhelmed with choices, I never got into Tenkara for the simplicity, but I love it now, because when I think about going out on a trip, grabbing a rod and a line and some flies is so much easier. Just that the barrier of going on a trip for me has been removed. You know, it used to be just a lot of work. You get all that stuff together. I'm up the night before tying hand-tied leaders and all this stuff. Now I got my Tenkara stuff and I can just go. So
there's
to
another
piggyback on what Anthony and Rob said, I think the big advantage there is control over the fly. I think there's a lot that you can do, especially if you're fishing wet flies and fishing kind of in that surface film area, the top of the water column, that you just simply cannot physically do with a 2-weight rod and a reel. And so the amount of control, the precision that you're going to get, especially when fishing those small streams, is going to allow you to do things, pull off casts and interact with that environment in a way that the 2-weight's just simply not going to be able to physically allow you to do.
I can chip in a little bit on that thing, that I have been fishing a lot with the 3-weight or less many years in Eastern Sierra, and a smaller, with the very, like Rob said, Tenkara rod is a very lightweight, and the tip is a very, you can say, soft or very flexible. I feel more of the fish than the 2-weight rod, and also like Matt was saying about the control of the fly. And yes, because the rod's longer, you can shorten the line out and you can cast easier than with the 2-weight rod. And the problem with 2-weight rod, that sometimes, most of the time, the line touches the water. So the water control the fly, so you don't have, the water control the line, so you don't have the direct contact with the fly. And also, like Rob said, it's very light and compact. And yes, I like both minimalist and also more fun to fish with.
yeah, not just like another little bit to that is often I'll go and I'll do both on a trip. I'll do some Euro nymphing and some Tenkara, and you know, I've got some elbow issues, and when I Tenkara fish, I'm not in pain. When I use the Western rod and reel, even if it's fairly light, it's just heavier and puts more strain on my elbows. And I end up, I'm sore the next day. But with Tenkara, I don't really have that problem so much. So kind of another advantage.
Just another question coming up. It's about salt water.
Yeah, so it looks like they said, what's the largest fish you've caught on a Tenkara rod in salt water? I've never used a Tenkara rod in salt water. Tenkara is one of a very, very broad spectrum of fixed line fishing types. It wasn't really meant for saltwater. There are types of fixed line fishing that were made for saltwater. So answering the question that way, the biggest fish I've ever caught on a fixed line rod in saltwater is about a 5-foot hammerhead shark. And that was outlying islands of the Okinawa chain.
I can feel.
I don't go near saltwater. I'm afraid of sharks, so you're not going to find me near saltwater.
I will let you know.
Second
Yeah.
Anthony's fear of sharks.
PA and Wisconsin don't have a whole lot of salt water either.
You can just put salt in the water will be just that. Is that right? Yeah, I live next to the bay here, and I got a lot of invite to go out and cast dry bass, and I will do it, and will let you all know about how to use a Tenkara rod. Hopefully, it will hold up for that. But let's go back, like Rob was mentioned. It's a fixed line rod, and Tenkara rod. It's just the rod that originated in Japan. For the name for type of fishing is in mountain stream, and beyond that, there are many kind of rods. So just like we have two-way rod, and we have nymph rod, and we have the fly rod, just like with us. So we have a lot of different ones. All right. So the next question in here is, can advice for the new Tenkara fisher? What's your advice you get? Rob, you want to start it?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 quick tips. Number 1, do whatever's fun. If you're not having fun doing it in one way or another, for some of us, getting pissed off and frustrated and everything can be fun. But if you're not having fun doing it, then you change it up. The other thing I'd recommend is lawn casting. Not all of us get to live on a trout stream like Anthony there. It really pays massive dividends to spend a little bit of time in your lawn casting to a dog bowl, a plate, whatever you want to do. And every obstacle in your yard, every bush, every bumblebee flying in the air, your cat, whatever the case is, all of those things become targets, obstacles, things that you can really hone your casting with. And by spending a little bit of time in the yard, especially early on, just 5 minutes, every other day, you'll really, really see a difference in what you're able to accomplish and how fast you're able to learn different things about the water, the fish, the environment. Once you're back on the stream, your success rate goes up as a result.
Sure. Yeah, and I would chime in, if you're coming to Tenkara from Western fly fishing and you've already got flies that work, like you don't have to jump in all the way, like a lot of guys coming from Western fly fishing, you've got flies work. That's one part of the equation you don't have to worry about. Use those flies with your Tenkara rod. Go out and go places that you're familiar and fish in ways that you're familiar already, because it works, and you're not wondering about everything. Then you don't have to worry about, well, what is this Tenkara fly? How does this? I would say the other thing is, like I don't know where you live or where you're fishing, but don't be afraid to go to the local warm water pond, or like I go to a local warm water stream and fish for bass and just get on the water. And the biggest thing I would say, though, to be something concrete, is use a shortish line. Make sure when you're starting out, a line that is, once you have your line and your tippet, not much longer than the rod. That way, when you go to land a fish, it's a lot easier. If you're using a long rod, you're learning to land a fish on a fixed line rod, plus you're worried about hand lining a line in. And I remember when I started, I lost so many fish. Just figuring out how to land fish on a fixed line rod was, now I don't think about it, but when I started, it was tough, So I would recommend making sure you have a fairly short line. Like you got a 12-foot rod, maybe your whole rig is not much more than 12 feet, something like that. So take that a little bit out of the equation. So.
My advice for new Tenkara rod anglers is to really focus on line tension and creating that solid connection between the rod and the fly. The more slack you've got in the system, the less control you're going to have over your fly, over your cast, where it ends up and what it does. And you're also not going to receive as much information out of a slack line, as far as like how fast the water is moving, or where your fly is at, or strike detection for that matter. So like really, to me at this point, I think really the core concept of fixed line fly fishing, of Tenkara rod fishing, is being able to maintain that line tension through the cast to achieve a fully extended tense line at the moment that the fly lands, and then be able to maintain that in the drift. while you're manipulating the fly, whether or not your manipulation is a dead drift or putting some sort of dynamic action on it. But you've got to have that line tension. So that's the number one thing. And then the other thing I would throw in, I want to second what Anthony said about find some warm water, even if you can. If I could design the ultimate Tenkara Rod training system, it would end up being pretty much just a pond full of bluegill, because they're going to keep biting for an hour, which means I'm going to be working my hook set. I'm going to be working, fighting the fish, bringing it in, landing the fish, getting it off the hook and getting it back in the water. And that muscle memory, those mechanics build up over time. So by the time you hit that trout stream, you're doing things automatically. Like Anthony was talking about, that learning curve with hand lining the fish those last couple of feet. If you spend, enough time at your local bluegill pond, believe me, those bluegill are going to give you the practice you need to get that down smooth. So when you've got a nice trout on the line, you're gonna be able to execute that quickly and efficiently. So find you some bluegill.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. I have been when I just started with the when I just started with the Tenkara Rod, I was coming from as fly fisherman, and I'm a member of casting clubs in Bay Area, like Oakland Casting Clubs and San Francisco Casting Club. And so when I just get Tenkara Rod, I go out and I cast about 2 or 3 times longer than the rod, and I modify all the lines so I can cast. And I did land few fish, but it looked like a circuit because I don't know how to control the fish, and the fish spinning around and wrapping around my leg. That's kind of fun. My friend was just sitting down on the river bank, the lake bank, and he's just laughing at me. And they always say it's he's trying to audition for Circuit du Soleil. So that's what they did. But anyway, so if you just started out, just to get any rod that less than 12 feet, all right, don't try to get too long. That's my suggestion. We have the next question over here. What the rod length would you recommend it?
I always like to use the longest rod I can possibly use on the terrain that I'm in. So, take a hard look at what you've got as far as overhead cover and bank structure and all that. And in most cases, a 12-foot rod's going to work.
Yeah,
but
I second that. Yeah.
But for the most part, go as long as you can.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's what I always say. For a long time, I was obsessed with finding a really short rod for these choked rhododendron streams. But I realized, that's great for some spots. And you finally come to that nice pool, and now you got this like 7-foot rod, and you can't fish that, that nice pool like you want. So yeah, use the longest rod you can. And a 12-foot rod, it may sound crazy at first, but in way more situations than you imagine, that 12-foot rod is going to actually work. You're going to get used to it, and it's going to work and give you the advantage of Tenkara. When you start to go a lot shorter, you're losing a lot of the advantage that you have with the Tenkara rod. So yeah, as long as you can handle and I remember the first time I went out, it was a nightmare. I'm not going to lie. It was just an absolute nightmare. And it wasn't even that, it was fairly mature forest that I was fishing in. And I just remember how hard it was. But now I don't think about it, that much. So you will get used to a longer rod. So.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I always tell people that we're teaching that we try to swap or we try to sacrifice line length before rod length. Yeah. That long rod is your lever arm with which you're going to control the entire situation. Yeah. And you will be absolutely amazed with such a long lever arm what you can get away with in very choked streams. The shortest rod that I carry and use is 340, which is about 10 foot 6 inches. And that's for very roto choked Appalachian, brook trout streams. I agree with both Matt and Anthony. 12 foot is sort of this magic do it all length. If you, however, find yourself, say in the Mountain West, and you're fishing some of the more classic, blue ribbon waters, maybe the fish are averaging north of 14 inches, trout north of 14 inches, and you just don't have to worry about, that overhand cover a 13-foot rod, that extra foot of graphite can really make a difference, a huge difference in what you're able to do.
Yeah.
But overall, 12 feet is sort of the magic, the magic number.
Yeah, if you can see this my background here, this stream behind me, like what Rob's saying, on a stream like that, a 13-foot rod is what I would use. Yeah, but for me personally, there are some longer ones, but when I get longer than that, I don't enjoy fishing those rods. 13 seems to be, for me, is about as long as a rod that I enjoy fishing. So
I'm fishing pretty close to like 13 feet on most of the stuff that I'm really enjoying the last year or so. And just let me say that, like, I see questions similar to this in regards to like fishing a small stream. Like, because up in Wisconsin, we've got some great, 14, 16-inch trout hiding in 3-foot wide streams. And people seem to think that you need a shorter rod to fish that. And, I'll fish a 2-3 foot wide stream with a 13-foot rod if I've got the overhead clearance to do so. In fact, I can get a lot done on a tiny stream with that long rod that way, even more so than I could with that short rod. So really, I think that decision is more of a function of overhead cover, at least in regards to whether or not you're going to fish it on a small stream, than it is to like whether or not you've got whether or not it's a big piece of water.
yeah, so you can see the stream in my background now. I wouldn't hesitate to fish out with the 12-foot rod, you know. You'll get used to it.
Hey, Anthony, could you repeat that? You kind of glitched out.
Oh, sorry. I changed the background to this brushy little stream here. This is in southwest Pennsylvania, and this is the kind of stream that I would have looked for a short rod to fish before, but now I go on there with a 12-foot rod, need like no problem, and you just get used to it. So.
Yeah, also here, this question, I think that probably good for Matt is, the question is about the farm ponds and target bass and bluegill. It's warm water here for you.
Okay, so like with warm water setups, I typically run longer lines because I'm a lot less concerned with line hitting the water with bluegill and bass than I am with trout. If I'm fishing for bass specifically, I'll probably even upgun to a floating line, a lightweight floating line, in which case I'll typically do about rod length plus a good 4 feet of line and another 6 to 8 feet of mono. That's the other thing on warm water. Like I'm typically not going to waste my tippet, like, because that's expensive and I'm cheap. And so I save it for the trout. And what I use on warm water is, 6-pound test mono that I can get as cheaply as possible by the 1,000 yards at Walmart. So like I typically run a longer, less stealthy rig on warm water. Really, I think really the focus on that system is more just visibility of everything and having the mass in that floating line to be able to throw a larger popper or streamer.
Yeah,
which is useful. So
yeah, definitely. If I could chime in, I do a lot of smallmouth fishing on local streams, and I use a floating line because I'm fishing. I'll be fishing poppers or hoppers and things on the surface, and I want my line to float. If you're fishing a popper with a line that keeps sinking, you can't fish it properly. And even on the ponds, the same thing. I want a floating line, and so like what I usually use, I'll see if I can get it to come in here, is let's see, it's this Cortland. It's going to be backwards. Anyway, I use it's a Cortland monocore competition fly line. So it's made for Euro nymphing, but you can get it just about anywhere. You can get like 100 feet of it for $50 or something. Make a bunch of lines. It's it's less than a one-weight line. It's as thin as you can use for competitions and still be legal. So if you look for competition fly lines, Euro nymphing lines, they make great warm water fly lines. You just cut off a piece, whatever length you want, and they'll float pretty nicely. So that's what I generally use for that. So.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. Same thing. I go, there are two ways that I fish. I do smallmouth in streams. I do, bass and bluegill occasionally in ponds when I'm, on a trip. I grew up with that kind of fishing, and so I'm kind of less interested in it now. It's just not the game I like to play, at the moment. But it's enjoyable. And my setup's similar to both of these guys. I actually use Cortland's running line. I haven't tried the monocore yet. The running line is 0.023 or 0.024. So it's a little bit thicker than what he's got. And I need that. You need a little bit of mass of a floating line to get that, that slider, that popper out there. And that's the real reason that I use it. If I'm not on the surface, which is how I like to fish for bass the most, just because I love the explosion. If I'm subsurface, particularly, middle of the summer, in the lakes around me here, the bass will be holding a lot deeper. Sometimes as, the bigger guys are down 40 feet. I'll get down 20, 30 feet, with a monofilament, line, usually fluorocarbon monofilament line. My sort of two favorite go-tos for bass, is a mop fly and sort of a version of a carp candy, which I kind of jig along the rocky shores at depth. So those are the kind of the two ways that I tend to fish for bass and bluegill.
Here is the upcoming with the question, but I know this thing kind of out of the realm. So some people ask about shark. Maybe we have to talk about that later. But is the about setting up for deep, slow tail water? I think Rob, you want to go first?
Yeah, so we've got a lot. When I moved from in the Mountain West, I was a little bit what I would have called deep, slow tailwater in the Mountain West. Is not quite the same as what deep, slow tailwater is in the southeast corner of the country where I'm kind of at now. So we've got places around here that have trophy trout. 30 inches is not unusual. And man, there is sometimes no visible current whatsoever. And you got to figure out how to fish it. There's a couple different things that I like to do. Just because the water is deep doesn't mean the trout won't sometimes come up. And so if I'm honestly fishing, I actually really like using traditional Tenkara techniques in that deep, slow water and trying to call fish up, trout up. The way that I do that is with quite a bit of action in the fly and a lot of casting. Particularly erring a little bit more towards downstream presentations, just because it's easy to cover a little bit more water for me in the particular tailwaters I'm thinking. Otherwise, my favorite, I also, by the way, use more like traditional European, English wet fly methods, the kind of stuff that a guy by the name of Davey Wotton preaches. If you don't know him, look him up. He's got some great information, and a lot of his stuff, you can take and apply to a fixed line rod pretty effectively. I enjoy doing that when I'm fishing a very large tailwater. We have some deep, slow tailwaters that are 100 yards across that are really, float only. And I'm casting, 50, 60 feet. And in order to do that, I like using a string of wet flies, similar to the way that the English would have done it.
I don't fish that kind of water much. There's one river near me that is a tailwater, and it gets pretty big and deep. And sometimes I'll fish that. It's got big rainbows and browns in it. And what I'll do is I use that same European competition nymphing line, and I'll put on 25, 30 feet of that if I need to get out that far. Maybe 20 feet, let's call it 20 feet. And I'll actually do a suspension rig. So I'll suspend it with like a big hopper or a big stonefly, something like that. And then put 9, 10 feet of tippet on below that, if the water's really deep, and fish a big nymph and actually do a suspension fishing like that, because you can cast it out far, you can anchor it, and you can you can drift slowly through that big water. So, and that big deep water, when I do fish it, kind of that's how I've been doing it. So I don't do that a whole lot, but I've had success doing it that way. It's just another way to tackle it.
So like, I don't, personally, I don't think that Tenkara style rods are too good of a choice for nymphing much below about 6 feet. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. So I don't do a lot of it. And I don't do a lot of technical nymphing. My nymph fishing ends up almost being closer to streamer fishing in the way that I typically like to manipulate a lot more than just drift. So honestly, like, man, like, but low and slow, that's something that I experienced a lot in the driftless. And I'd have to say that, wow, you know, on a tailwater, I don't know. I got nothing for you, man. I just wish it luck.
Yeah. And like Matt says, that is out of, you know, that style of fishing that I described is definitely out of the range of what you'd call Tenkara. I mean, that's using a Tenkara rod and, you know, in a Western way. So.
Well, Rob, was that a very deep hole on the Provo rivers that people catch a lot of big fish? It's deep, like up to like 10 feet or so.
Yeah, there are multiple of those. Luong's asking about the Provo River in Utah, where one of the predominant places where our company guides, and definitely feels like home water to me. There are multiple holes that are relatively deep and may start out with you know, with a little bit of a tumble, but pool out pretty quickly and get pretty slow quickly. I do a couple of things there. Again, my favorite thing, just the game that I like to play, is traditional Tenkara methods. You know, I'm getting a little more specific here, but to give you one very specific example, if you go to the head where that water tumbles into that deep section and hang a fly, I don't mean follow it, I mean dead stop hang it right on the edge, you will absolutely call up some of the bigger trout out of that hole. That's something that has worked for us and for clients over and over and over again. But otherwise, you know, I do enjoy, you know, tight line nymphing, contact nymphing techniques. You know, if it's not too slow and you can get away with a contact nymphing technique, that's my favorite way of getting deep. And I'll just position myself as best I can, pay attention to the current, sink a fly super deep, bounce it off the bottom, and you know, pick up fish that way. I don't enjoy that type of fishing as much as I do, you know, Tenkara methods most of the time, but it certainly can be effective. And you know, changing it up every once in a while, fishing a different way is a great way of learning different things too, about where fish hold, about how the currents affect your line, about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so Jeff have a question here. What's prompted you move from dead drift to manipulation fly when using nymphing and wet kabari?
But I'll tackle the wet kabari, you know, the wet fly part of it, and then maybe Anthony, you can tackle the nymph part of it if you're interested, and Matt, you can give us the right answer on both. So when you know, when you're talking about dead drift versus you know, manipulation on a wet fly like a kabari, using, you know, Japanese Tenkara methods, I don't look at honestly, I'm gonna flip it a little bit. I don't look at a dead drift as lack of manipulation. You know, the fly is not a normal thing with a normal buoyancy in the water, and that's doubly the case because there is a line attached to it, and because of that, you have to, you know, there are forces on that fly that are unnatural. So what you have to do to get a perfect dead drift is introduce equal but opposite forces. That's how you get a perfect dead drift. So for me, the first lesson in fly manipulation is the absence of all manipulation. In other words, honestly getting a perfect dead drift by knowing how to manipulate your line, your rod, etc. But more to the point, the question that you asked, it's very condition dependent, but I'll tell you this, most of the time I'm not sight fishing, not because I don't enjoy it, not because I don't, sometimes see fish. When I see fish, I frequently will sight fish, but just because a lot of times I'm not in conditions that are, that are conducive to sight fishing as much. So I'm doing a lot of searching. And when you're doing, when you're searching for fish like that, in addition to reading the water and knowing your trout behavior and trying to, make a really good educated guess about where they're holding and how they're feeding, I will go through a series of different presentations in any likely lie, beginning with the least invasive thing first. So what I try to do is walk up to a hole and I'll kind of knock on the door first. So maybe I'll do an upstream shallow drift, dead drift. Then maybe I get a little bit deeper and I do an upstream deep dead drift. In general, if I'm casting upstream, I will not pulse the fly downstream. I very, 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 very rarely, if ever, do that. Just the way I've been taught. Once I've hit a likely hole, upstream shallow and upstream deep with a dead drift, I might go to the side of that pool and start to cast across the pool and do some downstream shallow drifts, maybe first without manipulation and then with more manipulation, pulse, etc. And then my last dig into a pool is always the deepest one with the most action in it. At that point in time, I've kind of knocked on the door, and if I haven't gotten any interest, I just, bust the door down and sit down on the couch and, start eating Cheetos, and hopefully something pops up.
Yeah, exactly what Rob said. That's kind of the way I would tackle it too. Just I don't think of any one drift as a dead drift versus a drift with manipulation either. I mean, it can be combined, so I'll usually start if I'm using like wet flies and kabari, I'll usually start upstream drifts, but I'll do upstream swings. Along Tenkara Rod, you can manipulate the fly upstream of you, and if you're coming towards a rock, sometimes that change in direction of a fly will trigger a fish to strike. So but like I'll try the dead drifting first, and then I'll try upstream manipulations, and then go to more and more aggressive manipulation, just like Rob was saying, if fish aren't willing to play. And then the other thing I would add on, at least the streams the limestone streams that I fish a lot, or actually any stream, I've noticed, I noticed a phenomenon with myself. I'll have more success in the morning often. Often I'll fish a stream in the morning, a different stream in the afternoon. And I noticed this thing where I was having less success on the second stream. And I realized what it was is I was getting lazy with my casting, and I was taking the easy cast in the afternoon, because I'd already caught some fish and I was getting kind of lazy. So if I find myself not catching fish, this is maybe not exactly related to manipulation, but I'll then start casting closer to obstructions. I'll realize, hey, I'm not tucking that cast in right next to the rock. And sometimes an inch closer to that rock or under that branch can make a huge difference. So that's another thing to think about too with that. Is just how you're presenting the fly in general. You can change your presentation. You might still be doing a dead drift, but you're casting a little tighter to the cover. And I know on the streams that I fish, on the limestone streams especially, the brown trout will sit next, like an inch from the bank, right next to the bank. And that makes a huge difference. So that's my 2 cents for that.
Right on. Well, as far as knowing when to shift in between manipulations, I typically approach it in a relatively orderly fashion, as Rob laid out. You start with the least invasive and most natural, most likely with the dead drift, and then work into things that will, progressively be more obnoxious and hopefully get more attention. I guess I want to tack onto the whole concept of dead drift as manipulation. and enforce that, and that you know, the dead drift has to be performed correctly, and that's where it loops back onto that concept of line tension that I was mentioning earlier. If you don't have that line tension, your drift is going to be out of control. You're not going to be able to get information back up the line. You're not going to be able to detect strikes, and you're not going to be able to shift into precise control of your manipulations when you need to or want to with that slack in the system. So as far as when to shift, when what I've done isn't working, I try something else.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. And I'll go from dead drift, typically like no more than about 10 casts to any particular piece of water, particularly if I'm fishing for brown trout, because if they're going to hit, they're going to hit. You know, you can work your way around, be creative, use the water, but it's time to change techniques when the thing that you just did would have reasonably caught a fish, but didn't. That's really when I change.
And then I would add, yeah, just what Matt said, and I would add, pay attention to, people call it like a fluke, or like that, you know, fish that you caught accidentally, you didn't try to catch. Well, how did you catch it? You know, like, what were you doing when you caught that fish? I can't tell you how many times I'm looking through a fly box and my line is hanging downstream of me and I catch a fish. And in the past, I would have kind of written that off. But now when that happens, I'm like, all right, that's what they want, you know? So you got to really be focused on how you did catch the last fish you caught. You know, if you're not really paying attention to what you did, then you can't repeat it. So, you know, kind of focusing on what you're doing and where your successes are coming can really help you know what to do next. So.
And as you get, you know, as you build your own little bag of tricks, you will be able to cycle through different techniques a little bit faster. And once you get to the point where you're cycling through techniques a little bit faster, you start to realize that in, you know, a given couple of hours, you know, a given section of stream on a given day, they tend to like number 2, you know, over number, you know, 1 or number 3 or 4. And so for the next few hours, you just hone in and do number 2 the whole time. You know, the next, you know, you break for lunch, and in the afternoon, all of a sudden they're liking number 4 better. So you know, you give up doing number 2 and number 3 at all, and you're on the number 4. So that bag of tricks with techniques, you know, once you get it down, it actually rattles off pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't know about the nymph manipulation, because like Rob said, it's down here. You have to see the physics. It's down on the bottoms of the. I fish a lot of river. I rarely fish on the pond. So down the bottoms of the river, the speed a lot slower than the top one. And I saw a lot of most fishermen called that trip have indicators, and it move the same speed on the top water, but down the bottom actually go very slow. Now the nymph have to go the same speed of the top of the water. So if you look at that actually that's not a dead drift. That is basically, that's a motorboat down underneath, the submarine moving around underneath the bottom water there. So that is about that. So nymph, I don't know about that trip. Now I know that some people introducing those Tenkara manipulation down to the nymph. I think it just, to me, I don't know. Long times ago, I studied a lot about bug behavior. So I got about like 4 or 5 aquarium inside my house, and I watch how this bug react to it. So I believe that the fish eating when you're doing a jiggling the nymph, that's only when there's a lot of activity down the bottoms of the water. So the fish might think that either the cat is trying to move around and they try to hit that hard, but that's all the only time. But mostly down the bottom, bug don't move too much. They cause a lot down the bottom until they hatch it. So that was my experience. For Kabari, if I fish dry fly, I like to fish dead drift. Put a little bit of the grease, the floating grips onto it, and to be sure cast and to be sure that dead drift because I can see it. But down the bottom, when it tends to wet, I rarely use a dead drift. I just let it go naturally, or sometimes I tweak a little bit. I tweak during the time when a lot of sun onto the water. There's a lot of insect kind of hatching around, so you make a little bit tweaks. This kind of fish kind of trigger the fish interest. Thought somebody drowned and try to struggle to get out of the water. But that's all. That's the only time I use fly manipulation, and it worked pretty well for me. And I like to do that when I cast big flies, like size number 10 or so, hit onto the rocks and let it drop down on the next to the water, faster water, and I start tweaking it right away. So to me, that is very productive because fish might think that is some insect falling off the rocks, and they're here.
I'll say one other thing. You know, I talked about lawn casting earlier, and Anthony and I have both talked about, you know, not necessarily sort of this spectrum of you know, dead drift versus manipulation, and not, you know, it all bleeds together after a while and not really seeing the difference. Along those same veins, my fly manipulation, I guess you could say, starts with my cast. Almost every single one of my casts, particularly both nymphing and when I'm using Tenkara methods, almost every single one of my casts has some sort of little loop in it. It might be a bigger loop, but frequently it's just a tiny little loop. And those little loops allow me to play with the current, to align my fly, my tippet, and my line in the current in a manner that I get the presentation that I want. So in my mind, you know, my manipulation of the fly kind of starts with that cast a lot of times. If I am going to introduce the soy, you know, like a lot of pulse or motion to the fly afterwards, you know, it's that cast that sets me up for that. Just like Matt said, I might do a big open loop upstream so that my fly lands downstream and my line is taut on that fly immediately as soon as the fly hits the water. And I'm in full control, and I can do whatever I want as far as manipulation from there. So I really do think it starts with the cast.
Dennis got the question for you, Anthony.
Yeah.
What lane line would you fish with in that small stream? That's the stream behind you.
Usually what I do if I'm going to go to a small stream, a line about the length of the rod, and then, you know, maybe 4 feet of tippet. And then if it's a little too long, I'll trim it down. But yeah, I usually go with the rod length. Now, if it's this one, you can see there's some open water there, you know, so it's nice to be able to cast a little further and keep your whole line off the water. So I err on the side of that, knowing that now if it's going to be completely tight and the whole stream has got a lot of tight cover, then maybe I'd shorten to so that the whole rig line and tippet was about the rod length. But that's really the shortest I go, because then you can't, you know, you just can't fish at any distance from you. So I would say the short answer is I would start with a line about the length of the rod and then shorten it up if needed down to maybe, if I'm using a 12-foot rod, maybe down to 9 feet of line, and then use my tippet, increase tippet length or shorten it if I need to. So.
I can answer. Look at the stream. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So Dennis, look at that stream, and I can answer that the shorter line you can, because if you miss the hooks, you know what you get, all right? That you get the bushes right there because so many trees in here. So I like to be the line pretty short.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing Rob mentioned, the upstream pulsing of the fly that you hear about on small brushy streams. That's actually the one place that I do a lot of pulsing of the fly, because what I found was I was getting so many takes and missing the take because it was hard to set the hook. So I started fishing with a more active fishing style, because I would hook fish on, you know, just as I'm pulsing the fly, because they would take it and spit it out so fast. So on small brushy streams, that's where I'll often do a lot of fly pulsing, just because it makes it easier to get those hook sets.
Matt, you get something to say us about hook set?
Oh, you're muted, Matt.
You see, and I just gave you like the core secrets of catching all the fish, but like I can't repeat it. So unfortunately,
that was the best joke in the history of mankind.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Tip your waitresses. As far as hook sets go, you know, I found some interesting things for me personally this summer. I've been fishing a lot of softer, full flex action rods, and so I find that I'm putting less and less energy into the hook set, and I think that's translating onto the other rods that I fish as well. And really, what I'm looking for is a quick break to the wrist, or with the really soft rods, I'm actually doing a twist set that kind of whips the tip around and sets the hook. But as far as like launching fish into the air with the big old hook sets and everything, you're putting yourself into a bad position off the start to automatically come like way high up on that hook set, because you don't have a lot of maneuverability from there. But also, like, you just don't need that. Again, the key to the hook set is that line tension, to ensure that when the fish comes up against that hook, they're coming against something solid that you can resist and pull against, and that you can feel things through. So again, you know, that line tension is really critical to pretty much everything that you're doing. The hook set is no exception.
And I'll chime in with one other thing on the hook set. You know, occasionally I hear about people breaking their rods on a fish when they're hook setting. That should never happen, ever, ever, ever. The rods are actually quite robust. I know that tip section looks super delicate, but in reality, that tip section doesn't get flexed. When, you know, the flex in the rod is further down in the bend, so the tip section actually gets pulled straight. It doesn't bend. The most you know, delicate parts of the rod are just pulled straight. The meat of the fight is further down the rod, and so is the hook set. If you try and set your hook, you know, I see some people, particularly fishing downstream, they will point their rod, you know, downstream at their follow drift until their rod is pointed downstream. If you do that, then what's going to happen is when you set that hook, you're setting your hook in what I like to call an open curve, and you'll end up snapping your rod, you know, down here in these distal sections. You need to set yourself up with that drift so that the line, you know, that line is never coming straight off the rod. You know, you always have a little bit of angle in your rod, and that way you can set the hook and utilize the entire length of the rod, you know, all the carbon fiber that's at your disposal to get a good hook set. And then the fight proceeds the same way, just using all that carbon fiber. So if you ever had an issue with breaking a rod, one of these rods on a hook set, I am willing to bet it's because, you know, you had that rod in an open curve and you concentrated everything in one little section instead of using all the graphite that was available to you. Luong, you got another question?
Oh, you're muted. You're mute.
All right, okay. Yeah, we have a final question here. I'm not sure who want to ask more question, but the final question here is, do you spend time working a section of the stream with a multiple techniques, or just go one straight line and go back with different techniques? And that will be talking about fishing technique in here. So Rob, do you want to go first, or do you want? Hey, Anthony, you can go first this time. You right here.
Yeah, Anthony, go ahead.
Okay. I would say that I generally do hit, well, it depends on the stream. If it's a small, like the stream you see in the background here, yeah, once I've cast once or twice in there, I figure I probably spooked whatever was there. But I was talking with George Daniel, fly fisherman, and he said, you know, you'll see guys fish a flat with rising fish for hours, right, till they catch fish. But you'll see them fish this beautiful run with nymphs a few times and move on. He's like, well, the same thing goes there, right? There's fish down there. You just haven't got the right presentation to them. So when I'm fishing, when I'm nymphing and it's a decent sized stream that I know I haven't spooked fish and I haven't caught anything yet, often I'll spend a lot of time on that. Just because I know there's fish there and I just haven't figured out what I'm doing wrong yet, you know? So I'll try all different things. And then, and often where I'm fishing, I'm not out in the West where I've got, 10 miles of stream to fish either. I've usually got short sections of stream. So I want to get what I can get out of them, So yeah, short answer is on the medium to larger streams, I'll try a bunch of different things for sure. Yeah.
Matt, go ahead.
Sure. So, as I said earlier, I don't spend a lot of time hammering on the same water. In fact, I usually have to be careful not to burn through water too fast. But I'll try whatever I think is going to catch me a fish on that particular piece of water before moving on. And then, like I said earlier, typically, especially with brown trout, I'm not going to give, a particular piece of water much more attention than a few minutes to really reasonably logically work it and then move on. But I feel my catch rate actually went up as I started to adjust in that direction, because I also cast kind of in between prime lies too. I'll even, if the terrain's permissive, I'll cast while I'm walking, just to get some extra casting in to try to target different areas of the stream. But then also, like, I pick up a decent amount of what I'd like to call bonus fish that way, just in unexpected places or places that I might not target if it was a prime lie. But not only do you pick up extra fish that way, but you pick up extra data about the stream you're fishing. So, yeah, by all means, use multiple techniques, throughout the day if things aren't working. If the techniques that you're using aren't working, switch them up. And I would say, like, go to technique switches before you go to fly or other equipment changes as well. Like, change up where you're putting the fly. Like, I'm a big fan of what I like to call hone the zone versus match the hatch. And that, simply put, is just put something that looks like food into the area where the fish is looking to find food, and work that. And so going with that, I typically pick up a decent amount of fish moving through just about any type of terrain, as long as the fish are willing that day. Yeah, throw the kitchen sink at them, and don't stay somewhere too long, and explore what you've got, and you'll learn, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a question I've asked myself a lot of times, and at this point I actually stop and ask myself a different question. The first question I ask is, what am I going to have fun doing? And that's what I do first, because if I'm not having fun, if I'm not motivated to do what I'm doing, then I'm a lot less likely to actually learn something. And ultimately, at least in my game, what I want to do is learn more. So, keeping my eye on that prize, I do what's fun first. And what that usually means for me is, on most days, I'll kind of pick a particular method. Like, I might fish Tenkara methods one day or one morning. Another day I might fish contact nymphing methods, or one afternoon I might fish contact nymphing methods. And it's just based on, more on what I'm motivated to do than anything, what I think I'm going to have the most fun doing. Within those methods, within my method of choice for the time being, I try every technique I can, to try and figure out what is working and what isn't working. And I'll even sometimes switch up things. Yeah, I like to play a game with myself where once I've caught 6 fish on one fly, I force myself to change flies, and just to see. I've done days where there's been a massive buffalo midge hatch, which is like a size 16 midge out in the Mountain West, and that they're targeting those buffalo midges, but I'll throw on a size 10, you know, just for the heck of it, just to see what happens. Otherwise, you know, in addition to that fun factor and, you know, kind of, you know, choosing what's fun and then using multiple techniques within that, you know, I kind of agree with what Anthony and Matt said otherwise. So
Yeah.
for me, you know, I kind of, after so many years of fishing, I switched up my, you know, you know, I switched up the question a little bit to what's more fun. And then the secondary question of what's my goal, either for today or overall. For me, it's to learn. In the past, it might've been to catch the most amount of fish in a given time period. Then 2 or 3 casts to one spot and I'm gone, I'm moving. You know, there are days when, you know, days past when, you know, the goal was to catch the biggest fish. And then I'm really targeting prime lies. And I learned a lot about what, you know, a prime lie is. I see a lot of fishermen pass up the primest lie, you know, just because it's not the one that might've been in most of the textbooks. And nowadays, in addition to just enjoying myself, the other thing I you know, the game that I tend to like to play is catching the most difficult fish. And that's kind of the one that you know, gives me the most satisfaction during the day. That might be a really unlikely lie, or it might be, most of the time it's an exceedingly difficult cast, or an exceeding difficult landing, situation. A lot of times those two things go together.
Yeah.
So if I've got a really terrible, awful cast and I've got to chuck a fly underneath, you know, a massive amount of cover, into, like, you know, a root wad, and get it to drift underneath the sunken log, where I'm going to hook up at any point in time, and I still get that fish out of that situation. That's the one that, you know, that I'm most satisfied with. That's where I get the most pleasure. So that's kind of how I pick my, you know, technique and when to switch up.
I like when I was fishing with Rob last October, and this was kind of interesting. So we were fishing, I was fishing behind Rob, which, you know, it's kind of like writing songs after Bob Dylan in a way, but so I was fishing after Rob, but he was fishing like contact nymphing stuff. He was fishing deeper and I was fishing a dry dropper.
Yeah.
And I was coming behind Rob catching just about as many fish in a completely different way after he went through, and it was a decent sized stream, you know? So it just shows that, that you could even fish a stretch of water, go back, change up, fish it again, you know, and catch different fish that are looking for something different. So that was kind of eye opening.
Yeah, that's something I've done a lot in the past. Particularly my home stream here in the east, I've got about a mile section of water, and I will start at one end and fish it one way, and then turn around and fish it another way, and keep going back and forth, and then sort of keep track of counts, et cetera, and it's another great way of learning.
Yeah.
Well, I did some experiment with the fishing. It's a long stretch, about 2 or 3 miles long, and I just walk and just 4 or 5 casts per hole, and you fish all the way up 2 or 3 miles, then you go all the way back and then start the route over again. And it seemed to me it worked fine for me, and I still catch the same fish in the same hole, no matter what, because when I come back, that will be like hours later. The fish is still waiting for me. That's for the small stream, though. It's not a big stream. Big stream fish do move around. Yeah, so we have anything you want to fill in? We have a few questions in here from Mike Phillips, and one for Anthony talking about the Muskrat Nymph that you post on Instagram. Do you see that question?
Muskrat Nymph? I didn't see it. No. Let me see if I can turn off the background of this. I can. I think I get my camera to focus on the fly.
There's a share screen button there, Anthony.
Oh, really?
At the very bottom center.
Let's see if I can get the fly to focus on my camera here. So this is a Muskrat Nymph. Yeah, so it's just, I actually made a video. I haven't posted it yet. So I made a fly tying video that I'm going to post soon about it. It's really simple, but it's just muskrat. I get the muskrat. I have a whole muskrat pelt, and I cut the coffee mill and grind it up. You could just do it by hand if you don't have a dedicated coffee mill for fly tying. And it's just the whole overall, the nymph looks, the muskrat looks brown, the pelt does, but when you make the nymph, it looks gray, and it's got these little guard hairs sticking out, and they're pretty soft though, so they move a lot. And when I started fishing, that was kind of the go-to nymph on Spring Creek. It just looks like a sow bug or a scud or any of those crustaceans. And basically one material, if you've got, if you can use wire where you fish, or you like to use that, you could do a lead underbody, but I like to use tungsten now. And really on a lot of the streams I fish, I would be happy taking size 14, 16 muskrat nymphs and nothing else. So it's a good nymph to try.
Doesn't look like a muskrat at all.
No.
No, I can fill in. And Anthony, I got about like a few bucks of those nymph here from Anthony, and I would travel around. I don't know, fish nymph, you lose a lot of nymph. So I was traveling around, and then it was fish guy in Eastern Sierra. He guiding in Eastern Sierra. And I just give him a few flies, and he said, no, he won't take it because it's so light, everything. Guess what? By the time I got home, he showed me a whole bunch of pictures. He got fish with that nymph, and he's really happy with it. So it seemed to me like fish like East Coast food as well too.
They'll eat the Eastern stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something like, I mean, this is sort of related in a way, but the smaller, with Tenkara gear, I found you could generally go to smaller nymphs and fish them deeper because you don't have the drag of the fly line if you're, so you can generally go to smaller nymphs and sink them pretty well, you'll find.
Yeah, there's a website that we just sort of wrote up and posted and left there called tacticalnymphing.org, and it talks about that quite a bit. The idea behind that website is that it kind of spells out a philosophy for how to tackle your fishing, and the low profile, like Anthony talks about, of these ultralight low profile rigs we're able to use with fixed line rods. I agree, does allow you to use a lighter nymph and at the same time get to the same depth you would have with a heavier rig. And I kind of agree with Leisenring and Heidi and a bunch of the guys throughout history that my lighter fly acts more naturally at depth than a super heavy fly in a lot of conditions, most conditions. So I really enjoyed the fact that I could get down deep with lighter nymphs. Plus, I'll be honest with you, especially if you're using a Tenkara rod to practice some of these nymphing methods that we're talking about, I have always hated the clunk of trying to hook a big weighted double tongue kind of stonefly on the end of those rods. I really enjoy the subtleties of Tenkara casting. So, when I'm using nymphs, I like to use light nymphs.
All right. Any more question? And it seemed to me like we have no question left on here. And I would like to make the quick wrap up. And thanks so much for Rob and Anthony and Matt. And also, I highly recommend it to you to, I'm putting together a few more seminars like this, or maybe a little bit different format. And we're still trying to work out the bugs and see which one's the best way to approach, especially this time. We would like to have upcoming, we would like to invite Oni Masami, and he loved to be in here, but we want to generate a little bit more audience before we invited Oni Masami in. And for those of you who don't know who Oni Masami is, Oni is a nickname, mean devil in Japan, but Masami Sakakibara, he's a top of the world in terms of technical Tenkara fishing, and he was emerging between he pushed the Tenkara fishing in Japan into the next level, a sport fishing level. So Rob and I and Matt here are his students, and we have been taking the class with him. And also Rob with Tenkara guys in Utah. Chance and Eric is organized the class, and I highly recommend you to take the class with they call him as a master in Japan, mean teacher, with Masami, Master Masari. A class is really well worth it. It's about 3 days, and it's very, very, very good. And just go in there, and if you like it, just I will send out the email for that. And we also, if you like another topics, maybe next time we will focus on a little topics, and we'll discuss more different, like fishing, how we fish a different kind of streams, and how we fish different techniques like nymphing. And we'll try to see, I hope that Robs and everybody here will come back and discuss more about that. And also we're searching for more people. And upcoming series also, we have, we try to focus so the seminar doesn't go all over the board and people can keep focus. And also we talk about fly tying, and we talk about fishing in different states. And maybe we invite some guys on different states coming and give the presentation. And I really want to support the fly shops around the country. And I hope that someone would join on board and to talk about the fly shop. And anything else, and just send me an emails and we'll do it. One more question for Anthony here. No, that's fine. You answered that already.
Okay.
So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you very much, Robs and Anthony's and Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
For listening.
You all take care. Be safe.